Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here with us. It's very exciting to have this conversation planned for this morning. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Parker Blackman. I'm Executive Director of the LA Partnership for Early Childhood Investment. We are a public-private partnership of more than 25 foundations and the public agencies that serve children and families in LA County, and our mission is to leverage philanthropic support for systemic changes that benefit the most vulnerable children birth to 5 and their families in LA County. I'm really pleased for us to be having this conversation today. It couldn't be more timely. And I just want to thank a few people, tell you how this is going to work, and then I'm going to turn it over to our first moderator. So first thing I want to do is I want to thank Southern California Grantmakers and Unite LA, our partners in putting this forum together. We couldn't do it without them. And there's a whole team of folks that I could thank who are on the back end making this work. I think we've all been to enough Zoom discussions and webinars to know that sometimes things can get glitchy. If they do, I know you all will be patient and bear with us as we work through any kind of technical difficulties. So knock on wood, everybody, that that doesn't happen, but if it does, we'll figure it out as quickly as we can. Here's how this is going to work. First of all, this is I want to thank our participants as well. We have 4 candidates joining us today. 2 candidates who are running for seat 2 in the Board of Supervisors race, Holly Mitchell and Herb Wesson, and 2 candidates running for the open seat in District 7 for LA Unified School District Board. That's Patricia Castellanos and Tanya Ortiz Franklin. So I really appreciate them taking the time to be with us today. So here's how this is going to work. Each of the candidates is going to join us for 25 minutes each in succession. First will be Holly Mitchell here in just a few minutes. And so she'll have an opportunity to introduce herself and say a few words about her own views on early childhood and childcare. And then she'll be in conversation with our first moderator, David Rattray. And then we'll have time for some questions and close, and it's all going to happen pretty quickly. So only 25 minutes. And then Herb Wesson, the other candidate for that Board of Supervisors seat, will come on as well. After those two have, we've had the 2 of them join us, we're then going to switch over to the LA Unified Board candidates, and we're going to switch over to a different moderator for that. That's Vicki Ramos Harris, Director of Educational Equity with the Advancement Project, California. Last thing I'll say before I turn over to David, a couple things. One, I just want to remind everybody, this is a nonpartisan educational forum with the candidates. None of us sponsoring this, moderating this, have endorsed any candidates at all in the election. So it's strictly nonpartisan and educational, and only the candidates that appear on the ballot have been invited to participate in this. In terms of housekeeping, here's how this is going to work. If you have a question that you would like to submit for the candidates, use the Q&A box. Once you put those questions in the Q&A box, we can then share those with the candidates for them to answer. So please use the Q&A box for any questions. And then finally, I want to just say, as I said at the top, this couldn't be more timely. The issue of childcare is one that I think we all recognize for vulnerable families in our county. Childcare and early childhood education were already very, very challenging issues. And the pandemic and issues of equity and racial justice have only served to put a finer spotlight on the challenges that they were already facing. And secondly, this childcare crisis, because of the pandemic and economic recession that has ensued, it's really democratized the challenge. Many, many, many more people feel the challenges associated with childcare, juggling childcare and work and school. So this is a really important topic and the right time to have it. So with that, I'm going to thank and turn it over to our first moderator, David Rattray, the President and CEO of Unite LA. Thank you so much for moderating this first portion, David. Take it away.
Thank you, Parker. And can you hear me okay? Wonderful. Well, I want to extend the same thanks to all of our participants for coming in today on this event. We're really excited about it. And I assume the senator is, there she is, wonderful. Welcome, Senator Mitchell. So I'll kick this off by just, again, thanking the senator for her many, many years of service to LA and California's most vulnerable families. And we're looking forward to hearing from you. You know, the context of how COVID has affected our economy is intertwined with how it's affected childcare and how childcare has affected the economy. So I know you know how this has just elevated the understanding that everybody has of how essential childcare is to the well-being of not only the children themselves, but their parents and the workplace. And you now seen the polling that we commissioned that demonstrated that voters care a lot about it. They get it. And they want to hear from all their elected officials about how to better improve access to affordable quality childcare and early childhood education. So I'll do a quick introduction. Most of our participants know you very well, Senator Mitchell, but for a few that don't, Senator Mitchell has been a third generation Angelino, native Angelino. And in her early career, she led Crystal Stairs and then became elected to the California State Senate in 2011. She's chaired the Senate Budget Committee and helped usher the last several budgets through. She's been a tireless champion for many issues that many of us care about deeply, and including early childhood, early childcare, and early childhood education. So we're going to give you all a virtual thank you for joining us, Senator Mitchell. Hello, and wonderful to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great.
You look wonderful too, by the way, and you're healthy today, I assume?
I am, because I wear my masks regularly, so I can stay that way, and I hope everybody else is as well.
Very good. So, so let me launch with the first question, Senator Mitchell. Tell us a little bit about your commitment and your plans to improve access to quality and affordable childcare and early education in LA County.
Well, I appreciate that introduction. I appreciate you seeing early in my career, I joined Crystal Stairs. It was actually, you know, sort of mid-career, and I gave it a lot of thought about, you know, my entire career, I have served low-income working families in an effort to really improve their lives and to alleviate child poverty. I'd done that kind of in the health sphere prior to joining Crystal Stairs in 2000. And you may know the story. I was sitting in a budget subcommittee as CEO of Crystal Stairs when I got mad enough and frightened enough to decide to run for office myself. Fast forward 2 years, once I was elected, I was chairing that very same subcommittee and have worked diligently for the last 10 years to elevate early care and education, both in terms of the needs of working parents, quality of care for their children, and to elevate the professionalism and the integrity of the men and women who honor us by doing that important work every day. And so as a result of that commitment, I'm proud to have joined with members of the Women's Caucus to make it our top priority every year in terms of the budget the past 10 years. And as a result of that laser-focused strategy, you know, we were able to put back the $1 billion that was cut that fateful hearing that I sat in 2008. And yet we are clear that's not enough. I was proud on behalf of LA County to help facilitate the Child Care Bridge program for children in foster care the last couple of years. In the midst of this COVID pandemic, we understood that the child care provider community are essential workers, and they needed to be open and provide safe care for children of essential workers. And so we were very pleased as chair of the JLBC and the Senate Budget Committee to work with the governor to do things like eliminate family fees, to provide funding for subsidized providers during their closure, personally to provide masks in March at the very beginning of this pandemic for every licensed child care provider in LA County. We continue to work every day to make sure that the child care provider community is supported generally, but most specifically in the middle of this pandemic. And so I'm very proud of that work. And that's the work and commitment I will continue. You know, I managed the stage 1 contract when I was at Crystal Stairs. And so we had direct relationship with the county. And so I have a real sense of what that experience is like as a agency leader. And I think that there's a lot to be said about ways in which the county can streamline and make for a more efficient contracting experience and process. So it's seamless for the provider and the parent who's trying to go to work and go to school to be able to provide for their families. That's helped fuel my decision to run for the Board of Supervisors. And again, my commitment would continue.
Thank you, Senator. So you already started touching on this, but go a little deeper. You know, the COVID pandemic has decimated childcare, particularly families with children 0 to 3. How would you work with the business community and with the larger stakeholder group to uplift the importance of childcare and ensure that it can be included as part of the recovery efforts to successfully reopen our economy?
You know, I think we should be clear that the provider community, particularly for infants, has been struggling long before COVID. You know, COVID has shown a bright light on many of our communities that are living on the margin, for many industries and essential workers who are just barely making it. And so let's be clear, we were beginning to lose slots for infants long before COVID hit. And so part of our effort to acknowledge that and address that has to continue. I think in the position of as a member of the Board of Supervisors, again, I'm hoping that the federal government will acknowledge the role they must play to help local government, state, and municipalities recover. We are clear, particularly in LA County, that the early care and education system is a huge contributor to this county's economy. When I was at Crystal Stairs, it ranked like number 3 in terms of the resources it brought into the county. I remember seeing that report, I was shocked. It was like number 3 behind the entertainment or hospitality industry. That's the kind of information we must elevate as we continue to talk about what an economic recovery looks like and for whom. The early care and education community is not only a service providing community, it's a huge employer. And so to acknowledge the twofer we get, if you will, if we buoy up and support early care and education, it has got to be the smart strategic thing to do. You know, the business community in large part gets it. We have been working with the Chamber of Commerce and any number of business associations, you know, they get it. The issue will be when we are thrust into yet another horrific recession, that we all don't retreat to our corners and forget about the collaborations that we've been able to build in good times. And so it will be up to the business community and those of us in government and the industry itself to continue to reach out to remind the business community that these are important investments, that their workers and employees cannot bring their full selves to work if they don't have reliable, affordable, safe childcare for their children. And so again, these are relationships that we're not trying to newly forge now. They've been in existence. The issue will be, now that everybody is hurting economically, to make sure that we don't retreat into our corners and forget about the mutual benefit each industry affords the other.
Thank you. And you sort of touched on this, but go a little deeper on, since this pandemic has been coupled with this new enlightenment about the need for racial justice in our country and importance of our work on equity for our youngest learners, how would you help uplift the importance of early childhood through an equity lens and a racial justice lens?
You know, I'm so proud to have been a member of the Crystal Stairs family. You know, Crystal Stairs, established by 2 Black women who met as, you know, a student and professor at UCLA. Alice Walker Duff always framed the work of Crystal Stairs as the work of the civil rights movement. You know, it was our effort to acknowledge and bring equity to the delivery of service to students of color in South LA and to providers of color, to make sure they had access to training, to the resources they needed to provide a high quality service. So Crystal Stairs, that was always the lens that we brought to the early care and education system statewide, quite frankly. That's the lens I would continue to bring to this work. We all know what happens to children who are born into poverty, who don't get early investments. If we're going to really talk about poverty alleviation and creating a true just system, we've got to make sure that our youngest residents are invested in, and we pouring everything in them to give them access to that level playing field. We can't have Black and brown children and English language learners entering preschool thousands of words behind their white and middle and upper middle class counterparts, because we know, based on experience, in many instances, those children never catch up. And so again, this is an area where an equity lens is foundational to our effort to create a level playing field for children across the state into the future.
Thank you, Senator. So as you might know, some cities and counties have actually passed local revenue measures to directly finance early child care and education. Would you be open to that in the future?
Absolutely. It's something that we have to talk about. Sometimes ballot box budgeting ties the hands of policymakers, so we don't have the freedom to move dollars where we need to, when we need to. If we are going to talk about identifying a new funding stream that will add to the kitty, if you will, to support all of the supports these children and families need, absolutely. But we have to be clear, that children aren't a monolithic group. It's wonderful to have a well-trained, appropriately compensated child care provider that can provide a nurturing, supportive environment for that child for 8 hours a day. That child has to go home and live in a community and in a home that's equally as safe and nurturing, with parents who are earning a livable wage who can feed them, right? And so from my perspective, my vision is global. How can I create an LA County in which all children can thrive? That means at home with parents who earn a good wage, where they aren't living in food deserts and they're not food insecure, and they have nurturing early care and education experiences. It really has got to be that organic and that broad a perspective. That's why, for me, running for the Board of Supervisors is an incredible opportunity, an important opportunity. It's the kind of work that I've really trained for my entire professional career. That's the lens I bring to making sure that we address the needs of the whole child, which includes early care and education.
So I think that's a yes, right? You would be open to a revenue measure?
Yes.
Okay.
I just think it's important that we recognize that we have to meet the entire need of this child.
Of course.
But I would be open to one, yes.
Okay, so now we have some wonderful questions from our participants, Senator Mitchell. So I'm going to queue up a couple of those for you. How would you ensure the stability of our ECE system and its workers that are to be paid a living wage for their families and have affordability themselves to live?
I think the benefit of me serving as chair of the budget committee for 4 years, having served on budget sub, when I was chair of the Health and Human Services sub, for the child care element of the budget, I would always partner with the subcommittee chair of education so we could talk about the entire subsidized system, not just stage one, but everything. And so I think clearly by my example over the last 10 years, we've done all we can to shore up and acknowledge the value of the providers in this equation. It really is a multi-leg stool. And so we've not only worked to expand slots, but we have worked tirelessly to increase reimbursement. Family daycare, exempt providers, as well as child care centers. Was very proud to be able to vote multiple times as a legislator on the legislation to allow them to organize. Finally got a signature from this current governor, and that's beginning. And I think that will be one element to the effort to continue to talk about how we professionalize. And when I say professionalize the industry, I mean acknowledging the workers' rights they should be entitled to. How about some sick pay? How about some vacation, as well as paying reasonable, appropriate, fair reimbursement for this work that we all say we value. We say, you know, it takes a village and the children are our most important asset, but, you know, budgets are value statements.
Right.
So we have to pay for that. And it's important. And we know that the measurement of quality really goes to continuity and consistency in the workforce, and allowing it to be a true career opportunity for someone who can advance and make a living to be able to take care of their own family. At the county level, it's very important that they too support that effort. We've done it at the state level. The county has to put in their resources to make sure that we are walking our own walk, talking our own talk.
Thank you. So another question we have, Senator, is what are some of the strategies you would implement to ensure local cities and the county are working together to meet the early care and early learning needs of their children and families and support the child care workforce?
That's a great question.
The collaboration, right?
Yeah, the collaboration piece. And I value that and have done that certainly through my Crystal Stairs experience and now at the legislature. You know, if I am honored to become the next supervisor for the 2nd District, I am clear that within my first 100 days, it would be important to gather the elected leaders of the 9 cities in the 2nd Supervisorial District, to talk to those mayors and city council people, to begin to really come up with kind of a master plan, if you will, for the 2nd District, and primarily focused on economic recovery post-COVID. And early care and education would absolutely be a part of that dialogue and that fact finding. For me to be able to share with those local civic leaders what I envision as priorities and what we all must do collectively to help our residents recover. And early care and education would be a part of that conversation and would certainly be on the agenda.
So again, you touched on this a little bit, but knowing that next year's budget will probably see reductions, how would you prioritize early child care and education in next year's budget?
So, you know, I can never say there will never be any cuts. If I were to say that, I'd be lying to you, right? I haven't seen the county budget. We don't know what next year would look like, but I would hope that people would look at my 10-year pattern in practice, where I have stepped up to the plate time after time, found creative, innovative ways to expand funding for early care and education. Some of the work I'm most proud of in the budget is the fact that we were able to create, you know, a rainy day fund for entitlement programs when the going was good. As a result, in this state budget, when the governors may revise proposed deep cuts to all of these programs, we were able to hold them at bay and tap into that rainy day fund that we got up to be just under $1 billion to make sure that right now, when families need government support the most, they didn't lose it. So there were no cuts to K through 14 education. There were no cuts. We've expanded resources invested in early care and education. And that would be the same strategy and lens I would use. No elected official can make a promise to anybody about what cuts won't happen. I can't make that promise. What I could say is look at my history, look at my record, understand that I know that early care and education is an area that we can't afford to skimp. I have been known to say repeatedly that kids don't get do-overs. So when we cut the budget this year and say we'll make it up in years 4 and 5 when the economy recovers, that 3-year-old won't still be 3 and need that early care and education slot. So that's the lens I've always taken to my budget management, budget process, and that's what I would continue to do as a member of the LA County Board of Supervisors.
Thanks, Senator. So I think we just have a couple more minutes, and I have another question that came in. This might be the last one, and I'm going to give you then a little time too, if you want to do any wrap-up comments, Senator. So some legislators and researchers have suggested that early childhood professionals should attain more higher education, as you well know. And we're just wondering what your thoughts are on this issue. How would you support both the professionalization of the workforce, but at the same time honor the incumbent workers that are doing the heroic work today?
You know, that became a real kind of rub in our industry when First Five came in with their kind of grading system, if you'll recall. And we acknowledged, you know, some of the longest serving, longest term, best, if you will, providers in my service area at Crystal Stairs were women who had been in the industry for decades, who had come to Crystal Stairs and other resource and referral agencies and gotten trainings and had certificates. I remember Karen Hill Scott always also saying that, you know, we needed to afford those opportunities to license exempt providers, because she said, you know, there's no grandmother on the planet that doesn't want to do her best possible job for her grandchild. And that's true. That's the same for people who choose this profession of early care and education. And so I think we have to provide a dual tracks, if you will. Those who want and have the resources and time and acumen to pursue higher education, that's great. And those who cannot, for whatever reason, based on the hours they work, their proximity to a community college, we have to figure out another path. I was very proud of the work that we modeled at Crystal Stairs, where we partnered with West LA Community College and had the classes offered at the Crystal Stairs office. We offered them on weekends and the evenings. I insisted on that because I know the kind of hours child care providers work. We had wonderful successes. And so our resource and referral agencies across the state have had models like that, where you use this trusted nonprofit entity who has relationships, longstanding relationships with the sector, and people were more comfortable coming to Crystal Stairs versus trying to navigate a big, scary community college campus. And so I think through the community, the online community college system that the community colleges of California now offering, plus partnering with the resource and referral agencies, there are ways in which we can continue to improve quality by providing training to the provider community that really can be as non-traditional as our service delivery model itself.
Wonderful. So Senator, that's a perfect way to end it. Thank you again so much for participating in our forum today and for your many, many years of great service. So.
And let me just say briefly, I appreciate the industry for doing, having candidate conversations like this. It's so important. You know, when I ran in 2008, you know, I had, you know, 10 years under my belt then of working with parent voices and helping to establish community voices for LA County to help bridge that gap between the provider community, parents, and policymaking. You know, I'm clear. I was clear then, and I'm more clear now, having served 10 years in the legislature, that their voice and input into the policy making arena is critical for the outcomes to be what the industry truly needs. So I'm proud of you for being on the forefront of engaging with candidates and asking us all these very tough questions. It's important that we understand the perspective of people before we honor them by casting their vote. And I certainly hope that I can earn the support of all who participated today, November 3rd, for LA County Board of Supervisors District 2.
Thank you, Senator Mitchell. If we were in person, we'd all be standing up and giving you a big hand. So thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, David, thank you for that first one. I'm pleased to let you know that our other candidate for this supervisorial seat is on and ready to join us. So big thanks to Herb Wesson for joining us, and David, I'll turn it over to you for this next portion as well.
Thank you, Parker. And there is the council member.
Hi.
Council member, hi, can you hear me okay?
I hear you great.
Okay, we can hear you too. Welcome, sir, and thank you so much for joining this forum today. And thank you for all your amazing years of service, serving
Thank you.
Angelenos and Californians. Um, as you know, the context of how COVID has really affected our economy and our childcare and early childhood education has really helped us know how essential that sector is to the reopening of our economy and to the functioning of our economy, as well as the children and student success in the long run. But you also, I think, saw the polling that we commissioned that showed that the voters know it and that they're interested in knowing how the candidates are going to lead in this space about improving access to a quality and affordable early childhood education and early childcare. So with that, we're very pleased, and I'll do a brief introduction. Our participants, I'm surely all know who you are, sir, but for the one person that might not, I'll just acknowledge that former Speaker of California, Assembly member and former Speaker, and since 2011, I think you've been the president of the LA City Council and served this community so well over the years. So with that, welcome to Council Member Herb Wesson. And if we were in person, we'd be giving you a big hand, Council Member.
Hey, and I'd take a big hand right now, but thank you for having me. I'm excited about the opportunity to have a conversation with you folk about our future. I mean, we all recognize that the better we prepare our children, the better country we're going to have. So I've always had a commitment to kids, and so I'm ready right now to do a back and forth with you guys.
Very good.
But I do
Thank
want
you.
to share. I want to share this with you. So I don't know how many people you have on the call, but I want to swear all of you to secrecy because I am supposed to be at my council meeting right now. So I've got 2 computers going. So don't tell anybody that I'm slipping away with you guys for 20 minutes or a half hour, whatever it is. So now everybody's sworn to secrecy or I have to kill you.
All right, we have 120 people you'll have to mark.
Oh, Lord.
All right. Well, so I have a handful of questions for you, and then
Good.
I'll leave some time at the end for some questions from our participants, Council Member. So just to
Just
get us
Herb.
started.
It's just Herb. I don't have on a tie, so it's just Herb.
Okay. Well, obviously I don't either, Herb, so thank you for that. So can you share a little bit your commitment and your plans to improve access to quality and affordable childcare and early education in LA County?
Well, you know, my whole life is about helping people. I am a doer. I'm not the type of person that can just sit on the sideline and watch things happen. I have coached youth sports for over 14 years. You know, I'm a father, I'm a grandfather, and like I said earlier, when you started this, it's about preparing young people for the future. Now, I know we're going through a terrible time right now, and that our child care system has been decimated. And we could view that as a very terrible, negative thing. Or we could flip it and view it as one of the greatest opportunities we will ever have to build a child care system that actually works, almost from the ground up. And the way that that occurs is you got to have somebody that has the ability to bring people together and to listen to the experts, to listen to the individuals that have the hands-on experience of doing this, and then actually building a system. So that's what I'm excited about. I could cry in my iced tea for days about the situation that we're in. Or either we can come together as a people and come up with a common sense plan that puts us in a position to move forward in a positive way. So I'm excited about that.
Well, so you just led into this a little bit, but I'll give you a chance to go deeper, Herb, with the pandemic and how it's affected the childcare system, particularly families that have children 0 to 3. How would you work with the business community and with the other partners to uplift the importance of childcare and win their support so that we can have a way to a full recovery that requires the childcare system functioning?
Okay, well, you know, I'm one of these folks that believe that life is about relationships, and not to make this political, even though it is kind of political. I have always been supported by the business community, even in this race. The Chamber of Commerce, BizFed, the CCA, Hollywood Chamber. These are individuals that I may not agree with all of the time, but they know that I'm the type of individual that puts the right people in a room. And at the end of the day, we come out with some agreed upon approach to move forward. And if the Lord has blessed me with one ability, that's probably the biggest ability that has been given to me. So I'm proud of the support that I have from the business community, and they know that I'm the kind of person that they can program with. So I need to hear what their concerns are, what your concerns are. How do we move forward from this point? I have some ideas myself, but I do want to incorporate the plans from the professionals with the ideas that I have. You know, we have a lot of office space that's available now being unused. I'm already having conversations with pastors in my community about creating opportunities in church spaces that are being unused, where we have individuals in the churches that can supervise. In the city of LA, we worked with some of our labor partners in putting together a child care system, 50 learning centers within the city of Los Angeles, recognizing that we needed our essential workers to go to work, but that they had concerns about their children. So we have 50 child care centers in the city of LA that are open from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. I think that that could be expanded. We can use churches in particular in South LA, where we can have small numbers of children, still practice social distancing, make sure everybody is safe, but have that connection that we need. Last thing I just want to say why it's just so important. I have 4 grandkids, one of which is just 20 months old. Every week, this little sucker learns something new. Every week he's changing. He is like a dry sponge sucking everything up and in, and we've got to take advantage of that time. And you can't do it unless there's some kind of socialization, some kind of contact, the ability to look at other kids, and this is a way that we can do that.
Congratulations, Grandpa, by the way.
Yes.
It's the greatest club on the planet, isn't it? I have 6
If I knew
grandchildren.
having grandkids was so much fun, I would have skipped the kids and went straight to the grandkids.
I've heard that before. So my next question is, the COVID-19 pandemic and the uprising for racial justice really punctuate the importance of our work that focuses on equity for our earliest learners. Can you talk a little bit about uplifting the importance of early childhood education and childcare in a time when we're even more aware of the equity factors, but we're also at a time when there's tighter budgets in the immediate future?
Well, let me try to figure out the best way to approach that. first of all, I would say that millions of people in this country took to the street. Millions of people of all races, all generations, all religions, all backgrounds, demanding that there be change to systems that have historically held back women and people of color. So I think that the country has spoken, and that we're at a point where people believe that our children should be able to go as far as their abilities and their imaginations will take them. So it is important that we begin working on reforming these systems that have been unfair. And I think the city of Los Angeles has taken the lead in that endeavor. In fact, when I slip off of this Zoom call with you guys, the city of LA is going to pass probably revolutionary legislation when we begin to have a trained, unarmed mental health response team handle calls that deal with homeless folk, mentally challenged folk, people with addiction. So I think the landscape is changing, and people of all races want to just see a fair and a just world. So that's happening. But also, it is important that from a child care perspective, we recognize that governments are never going to have enough money. There's always going to be challenging. So it's about commitment. And I can't think of anything that is more important than committing to our young people, because they're the ones that are going to be responsible for guiding this city, this state, this county, this country after we're gone. So it's about having a serious conversation about commitments. And I would believe at the end of the day that the children will win out when you have that conversation. But we also have to realize that government's budgets across the world, not just in the United States, they're just blown up. So we've got to creatively look at ways to generate more revenue so that we can deliver the services that the people want, need, and expect. And there, in my opinion, is a common sense approach to dealing with that. I dealt with the dot-com bubble when I was Speaker of the House. I dealt with the Great Recession when I was president of the Los Angeles City Council. So the formula that you use to get through that is really not a difficult one. What you do is every department that generates money to that government, you make sure that they're properly funded, because for every dime that they generate, that puts you in a position to provide more services. For every dime that they generate, that means that there are less cuts. Also, you always look at revenue enhancements. And one way to do that is to, like the city of Los Angeles, government is not about doing what you want to do, it's about doing what you have to do. So in the city of Los Angeles, we regulated the cannabis industry. That is an additional $120 million a year or better than we would have had before. So these are the kinds of things that we have to do. And sorry I went a little long, but that's a subject I could talk about for the weekend.
Okay, well, we'll go a tiny step deeper. As you know, you just alluded to some of these issues, but in some cities and counties, they've actually passed revenue measures to directly fund early care and education. Would you be open to the possibility of a revenue measure in the future in LA County for such purposes?
Yes, I would, but I think what we can do now, and I wish the supervisors would have done it, with the Measure J, which if it passes will generate hundreds of millions of dollars to the County of Los Angeles. I would have earmarked a percentage of that to go directly for early child care, development and other needs. I do not believe that it's too late to do that. So when Lord willing and the people willing, and I get there, that'll be one of the first things. You want to have a revenue stream that is dedicated for that purpose.
Thank you, Herb, for that. And one last question, then I'll go to our participant questions. So as you know, in the county, many different agencies serve children and families, and they get sometimes settled into their silos. There's a lot of work to be done to improve the collaboration among the county agencies themselves to better support children and vulnerable families. I wonder if you would talk a little bit about how you would see the challenge of coordinating the county agencies themselves.
Well, the days of silos are over. I mean, here we are in this very desperate situation, limited resources. So if there was ever a time for not only agencies within county government, but at every level of government, we have to work together. We have to blend resources in order to deliver the services to the people that we represent. So I think that it is now the perfect moment to ensure that we look at blended resources, how to spend it. The left hand definitely needs to know what the right hand is doing. And sometimes when you're in a chaotic situation like we're in now, that creates opportunities to bring people together like never before. And if we don't take advantage of this moment, which in my opinion is the greatest opportunity for positive change in the 60 years that I've been walking around this earth, then 50 years from now, there's going to be a group of people just like we're doing today, having the very same conversation. So this is the moment. This is our time. And I think the desire is there, and enough of us are there, we can actually get this done.
Thank you, Herb, for that answer. So now I'll go to some of our participant questions. There's some great questions. I won't get to all of them, but I'm going to try to. One question we had is, can you just say a little more about what have you done in your long public career that has helped the ECE system?
Well, I think we started out when I was an assembly person, passing mandatory kindergarten. But my experience as a private citizen, dealing with kids at the PTA level. My wife was the president of the PTA, and I guess I was her chief of staff. So I think you can learn a lot about a person when you look at the things that they do when it's not a work-related thing. So we've done a lot in that area, but also we are working, and I'm part of the team that put this together to establish savings accounts for young people. We're working on what I hope will be one of the most progressive paid family leave programs in government. So I have a track record of being there. If I'm not the engine, I'm one of the cars in the train.
Thank you, Herb. So as we experience this new reality where virtual learning has come to be the only way to support learning for some groups in early childhood, the digital divide, of course, has become more apparent. In what ways would you support early childhood education in low-income communities where access to devices and to the internet are becoming overwhelming?
Well, you know, that's something that is not a new concern. And I'm proud of the fact that several years ago in the city of LA, we started a program called Our Cycle LA. You know, the city was just throwing out old computers, destroying them, adding to e-waste. So what we did, we worked with a company called Human IT, and we began to refurbish old government computers. We programmed at that point in time with the Obama administration, and I think it was Sprint or T-Mobile, I'm having a moment. And what we were able to do was refurbish government computers, and we got hotspots, and we gave them to thousands of economically challenged communities in the city of LA in our attempt to close the digital divide. There's a schools, about 3 of them within LAUSD that deal with teen mothers. We were able to give every teen mother a hotspot that was good for 4 years and a refurbished computer. Even now, just recently, working with comedian Tiffany Haddish, we gave out over 1,000 new laptops to young people that are in foster care. So that is it's so unfair, since we have to do so many things virtually when you have a significant portion of the city that is Wi-Fi deprived. We've got to creatively come up with ways to balance the playing field. And that's something that I have personally been involved with for over 4 years.
Terrific. Thank you, Herb. So another question we have is, it relates to the research and a lot of legislative leaders that are advocating for higher education for early childhood workers, such as a bachelor's degree requirement, and the overall hope to professionalize the workforce and pay them better as professionals, but simultaneously a concern about what about the current workforce that have been our heroes for generations, serving these young kids paid very low wages. And so I wonder if you'd talk a little bit about how you see the two issues of moving toward better compensation and benefits and professionalization of the workforce, and at the same time making sure we don't leave behind the people that are really taking care of our children.
You know, I can't remember the expression. Damn, it's killing me. Something about dance with the one that brung you to the dance.
Leave the dance with the one you came with, brother.
You got that. So I think that it's very important that we show the appreciation and respect to these individuals who have worked, because this is who they are, this is their passion, this is what's in their heart. They should never be discarded. I do think that that is nothing wrong with becoming more professional, but we can train and retrain individuals that have already demonstrated this commitment to our children, and try to create avenues for them to get additional, to take additional courses and things of this nature. But I would prefer to build on what we have and to give them additional ways to elevate their skill set. But you always want, life is about getting better. Life is about evolving. Life is about delivering services at higher levels. So I agree with all of that. But the individuals that have led us through this point, making just enough to starve, we should try to put them in a position so that they can upgrade themselves as well. They deserve to have livable wages and benefits. And I think there's a way that we can do both.
Thank you, Herb. So you talked a little bit, you answered my question about collaboration within the county agencies themselves. As you know, the system to deliver early care and education is very mixed. It's got private providers and public providers, and cities and school districts are a part of it. How would you increase the collaboration with cities throughout the county and with other public agencies and private providers to improve the overall system of early child care and education?
Well, you know, I hate to sound like a broken record, but it is all about communication. It's all about bringing people together from, you know, that do things differently and try to improve upon them. sometimes in government, we get so stuck in habits and our ways that it is difficult for us to accept new things. And so you got to have leadership that has absolutely no problems in bringing people along to help them evolve and deliver services better. You know, in the city of LA, when this crisis first hit, we quickly came up with $50 million so that we could begin to create these partnerships by laying out services that we were going to be able to deliver to the residents of the city. But I'm telling you, it is all about leadership. It's about having individuals kind of at the top that have their egos in check. You know, for me, it's never been about getting the credit. It's always been about getting the job done. But again, I have an ability to bring people together. And I think one of the reasons why people follow me is because I'm a doer. You're talking about early taking care of our young people and the things that they need from an educational perspective. Let me just say one of the most important things they need to do is eat. My office, when this pandemic hit, we didn't retreat to the safety of our homes. My team got together. We've delivered almost 2 million pounds of food, feeding families throughout the entire region of LA. It takes a leader. It takes an individuals that people are going to see will sacrifice themselves. And I submit to you that I'm that kind of guy. I get things done. I am not patient. I am very frustrated when nothing happens.
So again, I want to thank you, council member, for sneaking over here or doing your dual tasking. We just have about 30. We're not telling
anybody that.
We're not telling anybody. We have about 30 seconds left. Is there any final thing you want to say before you sign off and go back to the meeting?
That I appreciate you very much. Recognizing that the most valuable resource that we have in this country, in any country, is our young people. And that's where we should always invest significantly. So again, I thank you for your time. And I guess I would want to pass on, I'll be a little political now, that I am so proud that I've been a Democrat my entire life, and I'm endorsed by the Democratic Party. I have been endorsed by teachers. I've been endorsed by the County Federation of Labor. And when do you see a candidate that's endorsed by business and labor? That rarely happens. And I think that that's a testament to bringing people together, getting things done. You guys stay well. Thank you for having me, even though I wasn't here.
Thank you, sir. And of course, if we were in person, we'd all be standing up and giving you a big hand. Bless you for your service, and thanks for being with us today.
Make it a loud big hand.
Okay, we'll do a loud big hand. There you go.
Okay, everybody, be well.
Bye-bye.
Well, thank you, David, so much for moderating the first portion of our forum today. Really appreciate it. Before I turn it over to Vicki to run the next portion of this, I also just want to thank all the participants, the questions that are coming in, and just for taking the time. We have teachers who are part of our, who are attending today and submitting questions, and some of you may be taking time away from work or doing double duty. You know, providers, foundation leaders, agency staff, etc. So we're so appreciative of all of you taking the time to be with us and to submit the questions. We're doing our best to kind of summarize some questions since some of them that are coming in are similar. So please keep submitting them and just deeply appreciate your participation. So we're going to move now to the conversation with our candidates for LAUSD's board. And I'm so pleased to have as our moderator for this, Vicki Ramos Harris, who's the Director of Educational Equity at the Advancement Project California. Vicki is a tireless advocate for equity and justice for children and families in LA County and across the state. So deeply appreciate you taking time today, Vicki, to moderate this discussion, but also just for all of your work over the years. So thanks very much, and take it away, Vicki.
Good morning, buenos dias. Thank you so much, Parker. Appreciate the introduction, and I also wanted to thank the LA Partnership and Unite LA for the opportunity to moderate this part of the panel, focus on LA Unified. It's a real honor to moderate this discussion. And I always appreciate the opportunity to uplift early childhood. So thank you all for your leadership in doing that today and every day. So I would now like to welcome Tanya Ortiz Franklin to the panel. Has she been able to join us? This is where our technical stuff.
No, she's
okay,
here.
Good. Okay, welcome, Tanya. So I will start off with the introduction, and then we'll get the conversation started. Tanya is a LAUSD graduate who returned to teach 6th grade at Stephen White Middle School after graduating from Columbia University. She pursued her law degree at UCLA, and that's where she became an Education Pioneers Graduate Fellow, which is what led her to then work with Partnership for Los Angeles Schools. That's where she focused her work on changing the system by supporting many of LAUSD's highest need schools with restorative justice, social emotional learning, and the arts. Welcome, Tanya.
Thank you for having me.
Great to see you. Now you popped up on my screen. Thanks so much for joining us today. Look forward to talking with you. We've been talking this morning about the pandemic, how it's been disruptive to our society, including major impacts on K-12 and child care and early childhood programs. We know our essential workers need childcare, and many of them reside in our highest need communities. We know inequities in early childcare have long-term consequences in entire communities. We also know that the first years of a child's life are an incredibly magical time of learning and development. The research is so clear that it's critical to long-term success for students in school and in life. And we're excited to see the polling that our LA County voters are showing. They understand this. There's overwhelming support for early learning and childcare investments, and that they see this as a social justice issue, racial equity issue, and that it is essential to our communities. So with that context, can you share a little bit about your vision to ensure babies, toddlers, preschoolers are receiving the strongest possible start they can while supporting families as well as supporting the early childhood workforce that serves them? What do you see, what is part of your vision, and what do you see as some of the initial steps that you can take as a school board member to make that a reality?
Thank you for the question and the context, and everyone for organizing and participating in this really important conversation. I definitely have a vision that in LA Unified, every graduate is fully prepared. For me, holistic preparation is academic, but also deeply social emotional, which is being elevated a lot right now, fully prepared for college, career, and life, and that it is the student's decision to pursue whichever path they wish, and that it is our district's responsibility to prepare them. Now, we know that doesn't start in high school, and yet that's when we often hear about A through G, college readiness, or perhaps it's in 3rd grade when we're looking at reading or SBAC scores. I've been so grateful to meet with more folks recently about early childhood and the connection from birth through career, we might say cradle to career, and it takes all of us, and it takes an investment of our dollars, of our voices, and of our vision. And so I really appreciate the question about vision, because if we are to say that in the 2nd largest school district in the country, that all of our graduates are holistically prepared for college, career, and life, then it starts before they enter our public school system. Perhaps they are in our early childhood. I think we're at about 12,000 students, which is not the demand for early childhood in LA Unified. We know there are many more families who would love to send their students grants to preschool or early childhood centers, and then of course more for transitional kindergarten. I'm grateful we're expanding. But if we truly believe that all of our kids can be prepared, then we have to start very early. And that includes partnering with families, understanding their needs, what they want for their child, what they are able to contribute in terms of whether or not finances are an issue for early childcare. You know, I'm grateful the poll is recognizing that people care about early childhood, but who's going to pay for it is often the question, right? And so with compulsory ed starting at 6 and the district investing a lot in 4-year-olds, I do think about the earliest learners and how we share responsibility for financing the really important stages of brain development through play and reading and interactions with other students and staff members who are trained and supported to make sure that our students are ready for elementary school and all the way through college. And so I appreciate the question about vision, because I think in LA Unified, we need to say P through 12, and we need to be working with our community partners, with county agencies, with this state to really think about birth through birth through career, so that we are uplifting all of our children in our county. And to the question of our highest need families, particularly in this moment, in District 7, we have the greatest number of schools and therefore communities on the Student Equity Needs Index. And I don't know if this is going to come later, but I'll just make a quick plug for it now, which is that we know in District 7, more of our students and families need more from the school system and rely on our public institutions to match the need. And so it is critical that we invest our dollars in the areas that have historically not been served by institutions such as the school district and others. And so I look forward to being in this role and working alongside others to make sure every family has equal opportunity, which really means equitable decision-making about our dollars and our policies.
Thank you so much, Tanya. That was a great segue to the question around equity. So wondering if you could maybe go a little bit deeper on you just talked about the lack of access in general, and how even in highest need communities, that's even more the case with lack of facilities and lack of program options. So in terms of uplifting, so what are your thoughts about prioritizing resources, district investments for highest need communities, particularly for early childhood, and thoughts about uplifting early childhood in general from the lens of racial equity, social and economic justice, and overall prioritizing our highest need communities in early childhood there?
I feel very strongly about prioritizing our highest need communities. In fact, it's what I've been doing for nearly 10 years at the Partnership for LA Schools, working with schools in Watts and South LA, and outside of District 7 in Boyle Heights as well. So for me, equity means we recognize the wrongs of the past and the white supremacy that guides all of our legal and policy decision-making, economic decision-making in this country, and we act to reverse that. And that means being courageous and bold about shifting resources from those that have traditionally had, whether it's from institutions of power or outside of, and other sort of informal institutions of power, to those who have not historically had, so that they are able to compete on an equal playing field and pursue their wildest dreams, which is what we all say about America, particularly my family, you know, immigrating from Mexico, my mom, you know, the message was always education and economic opportunity in the US. And we know that doesn't just mean pick yourself up by your bootstraps, right? This meritocracy is something we need to work sort of in concert with folks who have not always benefited from that, right? And so first, it's recognizing that equity means we have to be bold and brave. And for me, that is absolutely centering our highest need kids and families. And so for the last several years, I've been working with community partners on the Student Equity Needs Index, which first is defining what we mean when we say holistic student need, right? And so California in 2013 shifted towards local control funding and prioritizing some student groups, which was important: English language learners, low income, foster youth. youth. And yet in LA Unified, with over 85% of students falling into one of those categories, we have to be really clear that even in a district as high need as LA, there are some communities that are higher need. And in District 7, 62 of our 120 traditional schools are in the top 2 quintiles of that ranking system. And so for me, that means we have to use community voice that has contributed to this decision-making about SENI, the Student Equity Needs Index. And we have to think beyond the schools that are traditionally ranked, so that's K through 12, and look at our early childhood programs, look at the partners and providers that we are or are not yet working with, so that when students come to those elementary schools, they also have recognition and additional support to make sure that they're ready for kindergarten and then are able to pursue the best possible education through LA Unified. And so I think it is about centering the highest need communities in all of our decision making, and it starts with the dollars and making sure that those closest to kids and their personal experiences, so educators and parents working together to use those resources in ways that will really uplift what our students need.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to move on to talking a little bit about the LAUSD population, particularly our English learners or dual language learners. So we know that LA Unified is home to the largest population of English learners in the state. In early childhood, we use the term dual language learners because all kids are still learning language at that time. Research shows that bilingual education is really critical to helping students thrive, like maintaining home language as they learn English. And that when we're not intentional about designing programs for dual language learners and our English learners, we're actually not fully building on their language assets, nor are we fully meeting their needs. So it's not really a luxury to design around our dual language learners, particularly at LA Unified. And we've seen recently incredible leadership on behalf of the district to increase dual language programs, including in early childhood. So what is your vision to build on that work and ensure that LAUSD is a leading voice for high quality early childhood for dual language learners, and certainly our English learners in our K-12 system?
So grateful for Proposition 58 a couple years ago, right? So that we can make sure we're investing public dollars in building on the assets of our communities. I love that you framed it that way, because we do talk a lot about student needs, but we also need to elevate the assets that our families and our communities bring to the learning process. And in lots of ways, that is a language other than English as a first language. And so it's great that we have elementary schools all the way through high school growing the dual language program so that students can graduate with a biliteracy, bicultural seal on their high school diploma. We know that is so valuable, particularly in Los Angeles, but in a global economy for students to speak more than one language with fluency and competency. And so appreciate the efforts of so many groups trying to work on both languages at the same time. Sometimes we think about, I remember when I was a student, right, there was a worry in the Latino community in particular to say that you didn't speak Spanish at home because you didn't want to be tracked into classes that wouldn't give you the English credits you needed to be college ready. And so now we're seeing a big shift to say where we have assets and build on those assets and teach both languages at the same time in the school and in the home settings together. And so I really appreciate the energy towards dual language learning before students even get to elementary schools. And then in elementary schools, let's make sure we are promoting all of the skills, speaking, listening, reading, and writing in both languages so that students really have a strong foundation in both and don't feel like one is privileged over the other, which of course in America, we have a lot of work to do around that. So grateful for your all's advocacy here, and I hope that we continue it in multiple languages. I know Spanish is one of the largest, but in LA Unified, there are dozens of languages. And if you talk to any other student who grew up in a country outside of the US, multiple languages is a foundation of their K-12 or P-12 learning experience. And I would love for LA Unified to be that world-class type of education where students are similarly to others across the world, valuing and learning with fluency multiple languages, absolutely.
Thank you so much for that background. Time is flying here. I want to talk a little bit about babies and toddlers. So historically, we know that if there's been a lack of access in early childhood overall, for our babies and toddlers, it's been even more so. LA Unified currently has 4 sites for infants and toddlers, so there's definitely room for growth. We know there's bond dollars that LA Unified can use to support transition classrooms so that they're ready for our little ones. What are your thoughts about the leadership LAUSD can take to ensure more of our infants and toddlers are served and at LA Unified, and also partnering with communities to ensure access overall in LA?
Yeah, thank you. It's a bummer that only 4 sites exist now, because I know there were more sites in the past. Part of it may be around health education, and I know a lot of the students at those sites, the babies and toddlers, are children of LA Unified high school students. And it's great. There's one on one of the campuses I get to work with now where the parents and their children have time throughout the day to connect, because we're learning in so many ways, right? Not just the academic instruction that prepares us beyond high school, but the social emotional skills that adults learn, particularly young parents might learn, is really important to be practicing and supported in that learning as well. And of course, all of the learning for the toddlers and babies on those sites. So I think about who are the children who are not yet served by any agency, whether it's LA Unified or others. And I worry about those babies and toddlers and where their access to high quality conversation and education and care really can be located, that is affordable, that is within their community, and that feels like the hub of their community, right? That they're not traveling too far or paying too much or making great sacrifices, which we know, of course, many folks do all the time for early care. And so I'd like to think about collaborating with many other agencies and partners to serve our babies and toddlers, whether they are LA Unified students or children of LA Unified students or not, because hopefully they will be LA Unified students. Those babies and toddlers will come to LA Unified, and we should be thinking more long-term about serving our entire community and not wait until they're 4 or 5 years old enrolled in an elementary school, but really starting from the youngest of ages to make sure that they know LA Unified schools are great options for them, and it starts as young as babies.
Great, thank you so much. I want to talk a little bit about families and family school partnerships. There's some questions around how can families and you as a board member work together to uplift early childhood in general, to advocate for our youngest learners, but also thinking about right now with distance learning and making sure that early childhood is part of intentionally a part of the outreach for distance learning, when we know now that our families are playing so much of a larger role in terms of supporting their children's education. So what are some strategies and ways for partnerships that you would like to help lead on, particularly from early childhood then?
Well, I think for distance learning, the first piece is that our earliest learners also deserve a device and connectivity, which was not in the original plan. And I know lots of schools had to ask for additional devices to make sure not only their TK students, but early childhood centers had access to a Chromebook or an iPad. And so that's step one while distance learning remains. But of course, we don't want kids on devices for 6 hours a day. And so we think about the play that they're missing, the interaction with their peers, the materials that are available at a school site that may not be available at homes. And so a lot of effective practices I've seen at elementary schools that I think can extend to our youngest learners are preparing those kinds of materials to go home. And also, when we start to think about bringing students back on campus, we absolutely have to prioritize our youngest learners. We know that developmentally they're growing so much in this moment, and they deserve to be back on campus as quickly as possible. Of course, given public health official approval and the willingness of the staff and of the families to come on campus. Of course, there is a risk always, but they should be given priority when we talk about coming back onto campus. And that's the kind of planning that should be happening right now. And that's the kind of planning I'd love to do as a board member with district staff and family members. Because we did a survey at some point in the summer asking what it would take to come back on campus. But now that we are 7 months into this pandemic, we need to actually match individual teachers and students who are able to come on campus, given their personal circumstances, and make sure that we have practiced the kind of health protocols that need to be in place so that families are comfortable with their students being on campus, the earliest learners included. So I think that happens with direct communication between the educators and the families that are most impacted, and hopefully the earliest learners will be the ones coming back to campus sooner rather than later.
Thank you so much. One of the questions from the audience is about the upcoming district budget, right? We know that there are lots of tough decisions that leaders on the board will need to make. And so how can you prioritize as a board member early childhood in next year's budget?
So with $8 billion, we can do a lot of things, almost anything, but not everything. And part of that, intention of the local control accountability plan years ago was meaningful community engagement, right? That's written into the law. And that should start happening in the fall for the June passage of next year's budget. And I fear that with so many challenges of the coronavirus and school reopening, that we are not yet prioritizing meaningful community engagement in determining budget priorities for next year. So hopefully, as a school board member, right at the beginning of 2021, we can have those conversations about where to spend our resources. Hopefully we'll also have passed Proposition 15 and have a lot more resources, but of course we can't only wait for adequacy to have the equity conversation. And for me, equity is about our highest need communities from this holistic perspective I described earlier, but also for our youngest learners and our families who are most impacted by the coronavirus situation economically, health-wise, and all of the ways in which it's hurting some families much more than others. And so I think it means we need to have listening sessions and advisory conversations, whether it's through Zoom, over the phone, multiple ways to engage in two-way communication, right? Not just where the district is talking at families, but where we're dialoguing back and forth about the priorities and really which students we can be serving next year. If we increased our youngest learners enrollment, that would be great for the district long term. We would, do better by our budget holistically. And we know that when we invest more heavily at the earlier years, then our kids are much better prepared for college once they leave us after graduation. And so I think it's absolutely the right conversation we should be having with partners, with educators and families, prioritizing early learning so that our big vision for kids upon graduation is not just a hope and a wish and a dream, but really a plan that has dollars attributed to the various strategies that will get us to those big goals.
Thank you, Tanya. Time has flown, and so we are out of time for questions from the audience, but I want to invite you now for any closing remarks that you want to offer before we wrap up.
I want to reiterate what Senator Mitchell said, which is thank you all for your leadership on this and talking with candidates before going into office. One of the most my favorite parts, I guess I should say, about running for office is connecting with various groups who care deeply about our kids and our public education system in so many ways. I understood some of that as a classroom teacher, as a special ed attorney, as a teacher educator and a policy advocate, but I didn't understand nearly the vastness of individuals, of issues, of really important conversations that need to happen to realize our big dreams for our kids in LA Unified. And so I just want to thank you all for creating this space today, for building relationships with folks who will be in leadership positions, but also know that we're in this together. And whether I get to serve District 7 now, in the school board member role or maintain my current role at the Partnership for LA Schools with elementary through high schools, I'm so grateful for the chance to have connected with folks and want to absolutely maintain a relationship so that we are realizing our goals for our kids. And I think we can only do that when we're in partnership with one another. So thank you for creating the space. Thank you for your leadership, and let's keep doing this good work together.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your vision and your thoughts for early childhood with us this morning.
Thank you all.
I think I'm going to hand it back over to Parker.
Thanks, Vicki, and thank you as well, Tanya, so much. Really appreciate you joining us. We're giving you a virtual hand. Much appreciated. And I think we're still waiting for our next candidate to join us. Our team here is going to give me a heads up when Patricia Castellanos has joined us. So while we're waiting, I just want to mention briefly that one of the things that we did as part of this overall larger effort to educate not only candidates, but the public at large about the importance of elevating early childhood and childcare during this election season is we commissioned a poll, which we released last week, the partnership along with Unite LA. And the poll was of over 840 likely voters in LA County, which is a very large sample size for a county poll. And it was done in English and in Spanish. And I can just tick off a couple of the really exciting findings from this poll. It was conducted at the end of August, so it's very recent. Overwhelmingly, people support in LA County support for additional public investments in early childhood learning and in childcare, with 80% supporting access to stronger early care and education. And also just a really great understanding from the voters about the connection between the pandemic, the need for our economy to recover, and these early childhood issues. So a strong belief that access to childcare is essential to the reopening and the economic recovery from the coronavirus. So 82% had a strong belief in that. The other thing that's really exciting is that a very strong majority of the voters already understand the connection between early care and education and equity and justice. 68% agree that access to early learning and childcare is a social justice issue. So voters are already there and understanding that. And then lastly, just want to say that this isn't just something that people feel is important in general, but it's important when people are going to the ballot box and making choices about the candidates that they support. So 75% of those likely voters believe it is extremely important to ensure young children have access to quality, affordable childcare and early learning opportunities. So that's just some of the findings from the survey. And you can find the full survey if you go to the LA Partnership's website, which is www.investinkidsla.org, and go to the resources page. It's at the top of that page. I'm just going to pause for a moment and check and see if we have Patricia with us yet. If we don't, I'm just going to ask David, since I see you back on, if there's anything else that you want to say about the poll or any other comments you have while we wait for Patricia.
Thank you, Parker. I want to share with our colleagues that we did share this poll with the candidates in advance to help sort of strengthen their resolve that this is an important issue that they should run on. All four candidates then got it. And as Parker alluded, we shared it with the press and got some nice coverage. So we do think this is a big opportunity for the partnership and all of us to build a sensibility with public officials and leaders about how they elevate the issue of ECE. And we do plan to bring this to all our sitting elected officials in the coming weeks. Is that right, Parker?
Most definitely.
So I hope you all grab that polling and use it in your own way to take advantage of the positives that we got when we asked the voters, do they want to see their elected officials prioritize ECE? It was overwhelmingly positive, as Parker said.
Yeah, I just want to ask Vicki if you have any thoughts as well while we're waiting for Patricia, because we did end a little bit early, so she's not late, just so everyone knows. Vicki, do you have any other thoughts? I mean, I know you've seen some of the top lines from the poll, so whether you have any sort of reflections on the poll itself and the results, or just so far, so where are we at as somebody who's really an expert and follows the issues of equity and early childhood and childcare over the last 6 months of this pandemic, just, you know, any reflections you have as well.
Sure, thank you, Parker. I think that we're finally starting to realize as a community the critical importance of early childhood and childcare as a foundational part for not just for our families, but our economy. So the pandemic has really made that super clear in a way. We just, advocacy just can't really, we've been working really hard for a long time, but the way that the pandemic has made that clear is, I think, something that we need to, that is being reflected from the voters right now. We also know that early childhood, while we support it generally, it's about like the political will to do more. So it's not that anyone has ever been against babies and little kids. It's been that we need our leaders to, with all the competing priorities, recognize that this is an area that we really need to invest in even though we have a lot of competing priorities, that this is foundational to our work. So I think the voters are reflecting that, and my hope is that this really supports leaders to make the tough choices and be the early childhood champions we need them to be, to make those investments and protect those dollars, and even look to expand, because we know this is so critical for our communities.
Terrific. Thank you, Vicki. I'm really pleased to say I believe that Patricia Castellanos has joined us. She has. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Vicki. Welcome, Patricia. Thank you so much for joining us. And Vicki, over to you.
Thank you. Hello, Patricia. Thank you for joining us. Good to have you here today.
Thank you for having me. Sorry, my instructions said to log on at 11:35, so I didn't realize I was supposed to be on a little earlier. Apologize for that.
No worries. You are here now. So I'd like to do a quick introduction before we get the conversation started, if that's okay. So Patricia is a lifelong resident of LA Unified, District 7. She's a parent, organizer, policymaker, and spent the last 20 years fighting to improve the lives of working class families. She currently serves as the LA County Supervisors Sheila Kuehl's Workforce and Economic Development Deputy. Ooh, that's a mouthful. And she helps create opportunities for the most vulnerable populations. Prior to her work as Deputy Director, her prior work included being a Deputy Director at LA Alliance for the New Economy. And she also co-founded Reclaim Our Schools for Los Angeles. So thank you so much for joining us today, Patricia. Let's get started. So as I mentioned earlier, but I'll just make sure to repeat the context for you. We've been talking this morning a lot about how the pandemic has been incredibly disruptive to our society and has had major impacts, as we've seen in our K-12 systems and early childhood and childcare. Our essential workers need childcare. Many of them reside in our highest need communities. So inequities in early childhood have long-term consequences for entire communities, and that's only going to be exacerbated with this pandemic. We also know that the first years of life, of a child's life, are an incredibly magical time of great learning and development. The research is clear that early childhood is critical to long-term success in school and in life. And now we know from this recent poll that LA County voters overwhelmingly support early learning and childcare investments. And they see this as a social justice issue and essential to our communities. So with that context, can you share a little bit about your vision for babies, toddlers, preschoolers to receive the strongest start possible while supporting families in while supporting families as well as supporting the early childhood workforce that serves them? And what do you see as your first steps to making that vision a reality?
Hi, again, thank you for having me. This is such an important conversation, and I guess none of us should be surprised by the findings of the survey. I think early childhood education and childcare has been an intense need, certainly across the country and definitely in LA. I think for all workers, especially low-income families, for whom childcare has been cost prohibitive, and I think many have been faced with challenges in being able to work and ensure that their children are safe at the same time. And so it is a very important need. And I think, as you mentioned with COVID, it just has magnified. And I think in the same way, and I mentioned this in a forum yesterday about education, the same now urgency around care and early childhood education has arisen because of COVID. And we're hearing it from the business community. I mean, in staffing Supervisor Kuehl for our resiliency task force that was charged with making recommendations on reopening the economy, I got to tell you, every sector of the economy was stressing to the supervisors the importance of ensuring that their workforce had childcare. And so I think there is now an opportunity to bring more people to the table to find strategies, but also to invest. I think there is now there is an aha moment among the business community in all sectors that we actually need to invest in this. It's not just some issue in isolation. Now they're being impacted by it, and so I think we need to seize on that opportunity to bring all the stakeholders together and figure out strategies for investing in that. I think the child care then leads into the early childhood education, and certainly for LAUSD, there is an important role for them to play leadership in 0 through 5. Starting with the ETK. My daughter was an ETK, and just a few years ago, and I can't tell you the importance and the valuable role that it played in her life. So just in getting her ready for kindergarten, and the support that was surrounding that, I think was really striking. So unlike even the TK class, there were 3 or 4 adults in a room of 17 kids. So that is a lot of, that's a great, teacher to student ratio. And so we need to we need to find more opportunities to do that. I think LAUSD needs to take leadership to expand ETK and TK, but also to play a role and collaborate with other partners on ensuring a seamless connection between the quality childcare into LAUSD, ETK, and TK. And then as far as the workforce, and look, this is something I think we need to compensate our childcare workers for at the level that we need to match the value of the role that they play with their compensation, and that just isn't happening right now. And so both we need to pay them what they're worth and for their value, but also we need to invest in their career development. And we need to ensure that the resources are there for the upskilling and making sure that we're creating pathways for them for career development as well.
Thank you so much, Patricia. So you started to touch a little bit on this, but in terms of thinking about this from an equity perspective, so access to early childhood was already incredibly limited during the pandemic, prior to the pandemic. And we know that access in our high-needs communities has been even more challenging with the lack of facilities and limited program options. What are your thoughts about uplifting early childhood from a lens of racial equity, social and economic justice lens, and prioritizing funds for early childhood for high-needs communities?
I mean, I think it's absolutely necessary. I think we need to, especially in the highest needs communities, and I think I saw something, a briefing that you all provided to the press that highlighted the dire need and wants. And so I think it absolutely makes sense for us to prioritize those communities and invest and expand childcare programs in those communities, and to really funnel our resources there first, because not only is there, there's a high need for childcare and early childhood education, and I think the value that brings to those children and the students' learning, I think is it can't be measured. I think, well, it can be measured, but I think is really important down the line for their future development. But also that there is where our essential workers are. And so if in fact our essential workers are essential, we need to make sure that we're treating them that way by providing them all the services and the wraparound services that those families need. And so I would absolutely support the prioritization of dollars and funding into those communities that most need it.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to move us on now to talk about one segment of the LAUSD population, are dual language learners. So Los Angeles Unified is home to the largest population of English learners in the state. And in early childhood, we use the term dual language learners because all children are learning language at that time. The research shows that bilingual education really helps students thrive, and that programs that are not intentionally designed around dual language learners and English learners, around their language assets and around their needs, are not fully meeting their needs. And so for dual language programs and ensuring professional development equips teachers to support dual language learners to thrive, that's not really a luxury, and particularly not at LA Unified. LA Unified recently has provided incredible leadership in terms of increasing dual language programs, including in early childhood. What is your vision for how to build on that work and ensure LA Unified is a leading voice for high quality early education for dual language learners?
I mean, I think you've said everything. There is such a great opportunity in LA, just given if we think about who the workforce is for childcare and both childcare centers and in-home childcare providers, as well as in most cases, the early childhood ed, ETK intake. Those, the workforce is, I think, reflective of a dual language community, right? And so there is there's already an organic connection. Like I think most of our workforce already speaks another language, and so I think it's investing in them with the skills to actually both bring English learners into fluency in English, but also to provide, an opportunity for native English speakers to learn another language. My daughter's actually in a dual language immersion program for that reason. I think it's just so critical as part, just being a citizen in LA, of the world, but definitely in LA, having a second language does not seem like a luxury anymore. It's an essential need. And, as you mentioned, at an early age is when kids are sponges. And so we want to take advantage of that. And I think we need to train, again, it's like, provide the investment of resources into training our current workforce, as well as think about how we're training prospective, the incoming workforce as well to be able to teach dual language programs.
Thank you so much, Patricia. So I want to talk a little bit about, as time is flying, our babies and toddlers, our 0 to 3 population. So historically, early childhood access has been really challenging, but for infants and toddlers more so. LA Unified currently has 4 sites that serve infants and toddlers, so there's definitely room for growth. With LAUSD bond dollars, there's potential to use those resources to transition current facilities into facilities for babies and toddlers. What are your thoughts about the leadership LAUSD can take to ensure more of our infants and toddlers are served in LA Unified, as well as partnering with the early childhood community to increase access overall in Los Angeles?
I mean, I think we absolutely need to do it. I think the bond measure is certainly an opportunity. I think there are other opportunities. There are many conversations that are being had about underutilized facilities throughout the district, and I think both 0 to 3 toddler childcare is an opportunity, as well as the expansion of ETK and TK courses. And so I think we do need to look at those underutilized facilities as an opportunity to bring in those resources, especially into the highest needs communities. And I think it's essential. I think it is essential that we partner with other agencies that are already doing this work, both to learn, to bring in the expertise, but also to leverage the resources. And so while I think there is a lot that can be led by LAUSD, I think this is a great opportunity that we should seize to collaborate with both the nonprofit sector, but as well as the county and others to expand services in this area.
Thank you so much for your response. I want to talk a little bit now about the pandemic and the opportunity for school and family partnerships. We know there's been a lot of intentionality about getting devices to families, but the digital divide is really persistent. We also know families are playing a role, an even more critical role in their child's education. So what are your thoughts about strategies for building partnerships between schools and families, particularly looking at our early childhood, making sure we're intentional about engaging our early childhood families to address the fact that a number are being lost in the system, but overall to support their education?
Yeah, I think there are a number of elements to this. I think there has never been such a clear need for a partnership as we see now with families and the school district. I even in my daughter's distance learning, the parents are actually engaging during the class or after the class, and so there is more of a partnership with even just with the teacher, right? And I do think the district, so the devices and the technology is one issue that seems like if not an easy issue to solve, an issue that has a very clear solution, right? So if we need to get devices into families' hands, we need to be able to replace and/or replace the devices that don't work, and just get devices to every single student and family. And I know the school district has been doing that. The county has set aside, at my boss's direction, has set aside CARES funding to make sure that students across the county are equipped with devices and hotspots, and that also serves a purpose for their family to access other services. So it's both for learning, but I think it provides a vehicle for families to access other services available online. I think as a district, we need to partner more with families and other possibly advocacy organizations that could provide this to support parents and families in supporting their students' learning. I think that's everything from just a training orientation on the platforms that the district is using for students' learning currently, and then just overcoming the learning aspect of the digital divide. I had in a forum that I had last week, there was a navigator who said that she was basically walking through a child's grandmother, like how to navigate the whole system. So I do think we need to more uniformly provide supports to our family on that score. I think on the early childhood education and the childcare, this is tricky because this is not especially childcare, not something you can provide. This is not a distance it's not a distance service. I mean, families need childcare, and in many cases, families who have students in K through 12 are not able to be home with their children to supervise their learning. And so I think the school district has already begun to provide some childcare opportunities. I think we should look at expanding that. safely, obviously, taking all the protocols and health guidelines into account. But there are also, nonprofits like the Boys and Girls Club that has been since the summer providing day camps where they have adults in small cohorts, supervising students learning. And so I think we should make sure that we're expanding those services for families that need the support, especially essential workers during this time of COVID.
Thank you so much, Patricia. Taking questions from the audience, again, time is flying, so we'll get to just a couple. So we know that the instability of the economy is really clear, and that's going to impact decisions made at LA Unified. So what would, how would you prioritize early childhood in the upcoming budget conversation?
Well, the upcoming budget conversation is going to be difficult just because there are still so many uncertainties. Obviously, we need to, the top line of budget priorities has to be how we ensure we have the resources to open our schools safely. And I think there's a lot of questions about whether or not we currently are at that place to do that. We're moving closer to being able to do so, but that is going to be a very resource intensive proposition. And so that is the top priority. Aside from that, I do think that early childhood education and childcare are very critical. I think, again, as I mentioned earlier, this is an opportunity for collaboration with state agencies. This is a priority of the governors. It has been, and so we need to work with and/or push our state government, the governor and legislator, to invest in these programs and to make sure that the dollars are there. And as I mentioned earlier, now more than ever, everyone is paying attention and has at the forefront of their mind the dire need of childcare, because now businesses want to make sure that they can bring their workers back, but they're not going to be able to do that if workers don't have the services, the supports that they need to be able to return to work.
Thank you. So a question from the audience about LA Unified was one of the first in the state to formally recognize 0 to 8, birth to age 8. What are ways you can collaborate to ensure equity and attention to development, social, emotional, linguistic, cognitive, and family engagement across LA Unified's children in early childhood and primary grades?
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to do everything we can to provide the seamless pathway between the early childcare and into our LAUSD, into the ETK and TK. We need to, especially at the early ages, LAUSD collaborating with other providers, as well as the work that we do, that LAUSD does itself, but to make sure that we are connecting to and that we have a very close collaboration with the regional centers to ensure that we're providing early assessment and intervention to students and actually equipping families and our children with the services they need, especially if in the case of special needs students, so that that early intervention is so critical. And then again, just providing that seamless pathway, and to the extent that LAUSD is leading those efforts, I think we can more easily transition children from a quality childcare environment into a TK environment and onto kindergarten, and that there is a better continuum of care, for lack of a better word, for our families.
Great, thank you. Another question from the audience. You mentioned this a little bit earlier, but sort of going back to the issue of compensation. What do you think LA Unified's role is to ensure childcare providers receive the compensation and care they need for providing? Right now, they're providing services also to school-age children who are doing distance learning, for families who have access to childcare. So what are your thoughts about steps that can be taken to address the compensation issue?
Well, so, I mean, to the extent that LAUSD is the employer, that's a very clear role that LAUSD plays in ensuring that we have fair compensation. And you know, I strongly believe that, you know, as an employer, we should be compensating employees justly. Otherwise, I think there is a role to the extent that there are contracts with other providers. I think there's, you know, some opportunity we have there to be able to influence the pay and salary of the workforce as well. I think this is something, you know, that is it's a bigger issue and question that we all need to take on and take responsibility for. As you know, already mentioned, it's work that's undervalued and underpaid. I know recently childcare workers have organized and are now represented by a union. I think, you know, partnering with that union to make sure that we're lifting the standards for workers, as well as, you know, as I mentioned earlier, investing in their upskilling to make sure that they have opportunities for careers is vital.
Thank you. So the time has flown and we are towards the end here. I wanted to see if you had any final thoughts that you wanted to uplift before we close.
Yeah, I'll just say this is, again, for families across the county, especially, and across the state, but especially for essential workers and, you know, workers or families in high needs communities. This is essential. And I think it's, I'll say it's not just workers, families that find themselves currently out of work. I think is also essential that they have access to quality childcare and early childhood education. Because, you know, many of them are also trying to find job or trying to upskill their, you know, go into training themselves to upskill themselves and have other opportunities. So I think it's essential that we provide those resources for our families. You know, we always, of course, have to get into a discussion about what our priorities are. I think we need to also be looking at what are the opportunities for increasing funding. Definitely Proposition 15, if passed, you know, provides a huge opportunity for the resources that our communities need, including not just K through 12 education, but I think all the other services that the families in our county need. And so we need to, one, be pushing to make sure that Prop 15 passes so that we're expanding the pie and the resources. We need to look at other possible, you know, sources of revenue from the state. As far as upskilling, I know both through the WEO at the federal level and the employment training panel, I think there may be opportunities there for employers to be able to leverage existing funds to upscale their current workforce. And so I think there is a lot of untapped potential in terms of funding sources, but certainly it is also the reality that we do need to increase the pie. And so I want to, you know, be able to work with, you know, you all in figuring out how to do that, and also with the families. I think the role of the families in this is critical, and making sure their voice is uplifted, and that they are getting the services that they and their families need. So with that, I thank you all very much. This was again a very important conversation, and I hope to continue it with all of you in the future.
Well, thank you, Patricia. We appreciate your time. We really need more and more early childhood champions, and so we appreciate hearing your thoughts on this issue. Thanks again for your time. Parker, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you, Vicki, and I also want to thank you, Patricia, for taking the time and for being with us today. Thank you so much. Final thoughts here. I just want to thank Vicki and David, our two moderators. Thank you so much for your terrific questions and moderating this conversation. I want to thank all of you for participating and taking time out of your day. And know that this is a public education forum, so some of you have been tweeting about it. That's great. And we've recorded this, and we are going to share the link to the YouTube channel. In fact, it just got put into the chat box. You see it there, but we'll also send it around via email to all of you. So you can look at this again if you want, and you can share the link to this recording of this conversation with your networks, with your family and your friends and your colleagues, so that there's an opportunity for many more people to understand where these candidates all stand on early care and education. So thank you so much for being part of this. Thanks again to Southern California Grantmakers. And David, do you have a final word you'd like to share?
Yeah, Parker, I just want to also extend our thanks to many of the funders in philanthropy that helped us fund the Choose Children effort. So this is our effort to expand what we did in California a couple years ago with the gubernatorial. So thank you so much for your confidence in this and your belief, and I hope you're proud of what you helped us pull off.
Terrific. Thank you, David. Thanks, everyone. Have a terrific day, and we look forward to being in touch with all of you again soon. Take care.